Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to continue off on Chapter 3. Chapter 3, Three Sticks. The Andor house was an unpretentious home built by Grandalimus more than 50 years ago, just on the outer edge of the village boundaries. It was put together with stone and timber, with a terrace that went all the way around it. The house merged rather well with its thickly forested surroundings. Inside, Avador was busy choosing something to wear for the evening's dinner, as tradition after the day of commencement. It would be held in the village's largest building, the Kentro. Standing just on the outskirts, it was the hall that held many events such as community diners or celebrations. The young elf stood in his room staring at himself in a full-length mirror. He wore beige-colored tight-fitting pants with a black leather elven-made boots, and was left choosing what to wear on top. He was slim, but well built for an elf, as young as he was. Before he had time to reach into his garment chest, there was a knock at the door. Grandalimus barely waited for a response when he entered Avador's room, carrying a small wooden box with intricate engravings. His face veiled no pride for his son. He had a smile that beamed brighter than the stars. "Son," the elf king said, barely holding back the tears of joy, and sat on the bed with the chest on his lap. "Come sit next to me." The young elf stood momentarily wordless. "Father, are you okay? I have never seen you this thrilled in all my life." Avador's face had a quizzical, almost suspicious look. Grandalimus remained with his smile and patted the spot next to him. His son did as he was told and sat down. "What happened today, what you accomplished today, signifies more than you have realized. Throughout the years of your education, I have sensed something immense within you, Avador. Throughout the years of your life, something exceptional has been guiding you in the way you are, the way you carry yourself." The Elf King gave his head a quick shake, suddenly remembering the small box that was waiting patiently on his lap. He opened it and gazed inside. "Avador, as you know, I, as king, have been through many trials." Grandalimus spoke softly now, hinting at the importance of what he was about to say. "Most I have not asked for or even wanted. Most say I am a formidable king. As a father, only you have the right to judge." Avador began to speak, but was cut short with a wave of a hand. "Since your birth, and for many years before, there have been countless unforgettable events and wars. Wars fought with steel and flame, and wars that brought good people to the limits of their capabilities. You have seen none of those wars. Each time, I kept you and your mother as far away from the bloodshed as possible." Avador shifted uneasily next to his father, but let him continue. "I have observed much of our enormous lands, seen many wonders, both good and evil. Scores of kings have deemed me as their ally on one hand and held a knife for me in the other. These kingships only operate through their own high councils and ministers, whereas the king himself leads no one." Avador just now began to understand the reality of how Grandalimus earned his respect. It wasn't only the virtues that his father carried deep within his heart. It was also the fact that he, one man alone, led a vast amount of followers that stood at his side, even if their death was imminent. He has no high council to sway any of his decisions, or ministers to squabble between themselves, trying to figure out the correct move. The only man who has never wanted to be king was the only man that proved worthy of the title. Grandalimus reached into the small, intricately printed box and withdrew articles of clothing that shimmered in the waning light. Covering a gleaming silver chainmail shirt that sparkled with hints of green when light touched it in a certain way, was a hooded, sleeveless tunic violet in color that ended in a V, a foot below the waistline's front and back. A pair of matching chainmail pants were folded neatly at the bottom of the wooden box. Avador remained flabbergasted, not ever seeing these clothes before now. His father wore an identical set throughout his reign that was now tattered and worn during the course of many hard-fought battles. "Son," said Grandalimus, holding the soft-textured tunic before Avador, revealing a large black A that ran the length of its front, "I had this made along with mine the day you were born. Mine is now well worn, while this, after 20 years, is just now being taken out of its box. I was saving it for when I felt it would be worn with merit and pride. By you, young Avador. The Elven King allowed the tears to flow down his cheeks. Tonight you will wear it at dinner. Tonight he let his words end abruptly and embraced his son, who was also choked up. After a moment, he salvaged his composure and stood up. With a smile and a friendly jab on the chin, Grandalimus was out the door. The Kentro was convulsing with activity. Tables were set up in long stretches within the hall and outside the balcony, which overlooked the wild Cerulean river that flowed relentlessly within a deep gorge. Masters at all levels took their places at their designated places next to their pupils. Cooks worked hastily to finish and send out the last of the evening's meal. Wine and ale were distributed among each table, and the people felt looser and at ease as the night progressed. Tonight there was no moon, for it was shrouded in murky patches of cloud. Though the wind howled through the distant trees as though weeping in disdain, tonight no one seemed to discern the distributing atmosphere of the surrounding background. Outside, on the balcony, bamboo poles that held torches were set up all around the outer edge to illuminate the otherwise gloom of the outdoors. Small groups of friends joked and laughed between themselves. Others walked around congratulating each other and enjoying the celebration. Avador stood alone at one corner of the balcony. His hands gripped the outer railing as he gazed at the black depths below, where he could faintly hear the gushing resonance of the river. The air was cool and sent his long hair fluttering softly about his cheeks. His elven eyes scanned across the chasm, penetrating the darkness and making out the outline of the impressive peaks of the Trude Mountains, home of the burly pike dwarves. He frequently visited the foot of those mountains with his father, but never ventured further. The dwarves he met there were kind enough, always ready with a good joke or a funny story. They took a liking to young Avador from the moment they met. Charismatic lad, they had called him, with a wink, and told him to take care of his father. Someone slamming a powerful hand on his shoulder abruptly interrupted the young elf's thoughts. "Hey!" A familiar voice broke through the noise made by the festive crowd. "What's the matter with you tonight, my pointed-eared comrade?" It was Tigran Eviathane, Avador's companion throughout combat training. He was a human, well-built and tall, nearly 7 feet at full height. He wore his thick black hair long. It ended at his waist and tied back with a leather band. Black eyes caught behind a fallen tuft of hair twinkled in cheerfulness that complemented an ever-warm smile. The clothing he wore showed that he wasn't one for being appropriate and proper. He was who he was, no matter what he wore or where he presented himself. This evening's attire was a simple leather vest and his standard worn-out hunting pants. "You're the evening's luminary famous person, and you're moping around here like your dad's not the king of the elves or something." Tigran pulled on Avador's ear, making him smile for the first time this evening. "You're right, my friend." Avador looked at him ruefully. "Tonight I should be rejoicing. It's not every day you graduate from the most difficult academy in all the land and have the fortune to do it with the greatest friends anyone could ever ask." "What is this?" Avador was interrupted again, this time by a slender, dark, bearded chap in blue robes. "Ignore Falstaff and have your own private party night?" "Falstaff!" exclaimed Avador, startled by all the suddenness. "No, we were, I don't know, Tigran, what were we doing?" The young elf ran out of words, but the trio laughed, and with their arms around each other's shoulders went inside, found a table, and began to relish the moment with large glasses of ale. Symmetra Andor was dwelling in her own little world. She was sitting near the stone fireplace at a table with her husband. She wore her crimson hair in a thick braid and was dressed in creamy white. Grandalimus couldn't help but smile at how radiant she looked, especially with the fire intensifying her features. Though he did not know it, Symmetra was also admiring him. She noted all the changes in his characteristics and at how handsome he remained throughout the years. His jaw, square and firm, always held high with dignity and honor. She observed tiredness in his green eyes, masked only by a misleading smile, which only she cannot be fooled by. She noticed his honey blonde hair graying slightly at the temples, bringing the word eminent to mind. He looked every bit the king he was. Tonight, though, his mind was divided. Symmetra mentioned this to him, but he quickly dismissed it as just her mind's eye. Instead of persisting in her thought, knowing she wasn't going to go anywhere with it, she glanced over at her son's table. He was sitting with two of his closest friends whom he had known since childhood, and now graduated together. The bond between them was unquestionably genuine, an authentic link between three very different yet distinctive individuals. She smiled at their merriment and at the same time wondered where all these years had been consumed. She watched Avador, all grown and developing into manhood. He shone brilliantly in his pristine outfit. Grandolimus, she noticed, did nothing to suppress his show of pride either. His smile was ear to ear as he too stared at their son, giving Symmetra's hand an acknowledging squeeze. "This evening is faultless," he said, almost inaudibly. Symmetra wasn't sure if he was talking to her or just thinking out loud, but she agreed anyway. Then, without warning, a severe-looking knife flew through the crowded hall and lodged itself into the edge of Avador's wooden table. Somebody shouted, and the hall instantly went silent. A large, bulky figure of a man, silhouetted in the rear entryway, stood shaking and breathing heavily. After seeming content with the reaction of the silenced crowd, he took a step into the hall and into the dim light. It was Master Wilm, enraged and very drunk. "Andor!" he screamed at the top of his lungs, his voice penetrating through the silence in a thunderous boom. He took another pace towards the table of young companions, his eyes fixed on Avador. Symmetra began to move to her son's side, but was quickly stopped by her husband's grip. Avador was on his feet with the dexterity of a cat. His friends were instantly at his sides. Wilm charged blindly, rushing towards them like an enraged bull. The three friends scattered at once, and Wilm slammed both fists onto the table, splitting it in two. As the glasses and ale jugs sprayed their contents, the companions were all over Master Wilm. Avador swept his legs out from under him, while Tigran Iviathane smashed a powerful elbow into Wilm's unsuspecting jaw. The big man went down with a resounding crash. Knowing this only made Wilm even madder, Falstaff raised a wooden chair high over his head and brought it down hard, breaking three of the big man's ribs. Master Wilm went limp and remained where he was in a broken heap on the floor. Avador kneeled at the large man's side and checked if he was still breathing. Finding there was short, ragged breaths, he stood slowly to his feet. "Someone get Master Wilm to a healer," Avador said, still half stunned by what had just taken place. The king of the elves stood out on the balcony with his hands placed loosely on the outer railing. The cooled steel felt relaxing on his calloused palms. He faced the Trude Mountains that loomed out of the darkness beyond. The Kentro was now empty. The people of Pelendria eventually withdrew from the night's ceremonies and retired to their homes. The nearby village a brisk walk in the gloomy night. Symmetra, accompanied by her son and his two friends, made the short trek through the opaque forest that surrounded her home. Grandolimus chose to stay alone. His mind grew increasingly everywhere. One torch was kept alight and he stood by it, letting its glow envelop him. It was hours later. The wind increased and he subconsciously pulled his cloak around his shoulders when he heard someone approaching from the entrance of the hall. The serene silence was distributed by laughter advancing through the darkness of an empty building. It was Avador, Tigran, and Falstaff. They had decided to come back to the Kentro to meet Grandolimus, for he was the only other person awake in the village. "Evening, father," Avador said with unconcealed delight. "Do you mind if we join you out here on the terrace?" Grandolimus, though weary, smiled and motioned the three to a small table away from the torchlight. "What's the matter, my young conquerors? Can't sleep tonight?" Grandolimus was sarcastic, knowing the reason they were awake was from all the adrenaline invoked by tonight's occurrence. The four sat at the table after Falstaff obtained a jug of ale with accompanying cups and set them down in front of everybody. Soon, the veranda was once again alive with high spirits and gaiety. The company of four had their own private party that excluded the rest of the world. Stories of the past were once again brought to life and ignited laughter. Tales of each other's lives as they matured together, some humorous and some that provoked embarrassment, were replayed tonight on the terrace. This went on until the sky began to fight off dusk and change into a feverish orange. The four were now silhouettes against the mountain background. In the growing silence, the resonance of the Cerulean River rushed passionately in the canyon below. Grandolimus sat with his feet fixed firmly on the wooden decking. His back to the mountains, he faced the three friends. His expression became stern and serious, which caused everyone to become silent and attentive. "Boys," the Elven King said quietly as they sat in the peculiar period between night and day, "over the years I've had 3 sons, not one. I have watched you all grow from infants to become the men that you are today. Not once have you lied or cheated each other. You have done only the contrary." Grandolimus's eyes fixed on the eyes of the companions, each in turn. They fidgeted uneasily under the scrutiny of the Elf King. "If I were to take only 3 people with me in a war," Grandolimus continued, "it would be you 3. Trust and friendship, such as yours, are the elements required not only in warfare, but also in life. Contrary to what Wilm has taught, combat is more than just a series of parries, blocks, retreats, and advances. It is heart. It is passion for your people. It is taking what is right and turning it into a fighting force so strong that it can shield you and everybody you love from anything trying to harm you." Grandolimus stood now and walked around the table to be with the boys. "If you take a stick, a fair-sized stick, you can break it. It does not take that much. But if you put a second stick with the first and try to break them, you might, but with more difficulty." His face grew more intense, and the youngsters gave him their undivided attention. "Find a third stick and put it together with the other 2. You will never break them." He gave them all a wink and turned his back. "Tigran Aviathane, you have been Avador's ever-faithful friend since the beginning of your time together. You have looked out for each other for as long as I can remember." Images of the 2 boys helping one another growing up came to the Elf King in a lucid rush. "I trust you with his life." Avador was starting to not like where this conversation was heading. "Falstaff," Grandolimus continued, without facing them, "you and my son have studied together about legends and lore, languages and races. You have researched cultures and history, but that is not what you are after." Falstaff swallowed hard as Grandolimus turned now and faced him. "You want to be a wielder of magic, though you have never seen such a thing. None of you have. Not everyone can be a magic user. You have to want it to be a part of you. You have to believe you can use it. I have seen magic in my travels, and believe me, it can be the most wondrous thing in the right hands. But it can also be the most horrifying entity in the hands of wickedness." He strode now to where Falstaff was sitting and put a strong hand on the young man's slender shoulder. Falstaff looked up at him with intense blue eyes. "You have it within you, young mage to be. I have seen the nearly non-existent art being used, and believe me, you are one of the rare people that can bring it to life. But take heed when I tell you this. Power is nothing without control." In the silence that followed, there was a growing uneasiness, yet a feeling of mutual understanding between the men standing on the Kentro's terrace. Grandolimus took his seat next to his son and put his arm around his shoulders. "Son," he said with pride returning to his face, "the time has come for you to lead." An icy chill seized Avador's heart so abruptly that it froze him where he sat. He began to speak, but words were lost somewhere in his throat. "Fear is not an option for you, Elven Prince." His words were a mere whisper. "We have both felt a surge within us that we do not comprehend. I will do my best to try and recognize what happened exactly. The only thing I truly know is that I am running out of time." "But you have many years left within you, father." Avador's voice returned to him with a sudden rush. "Why are you saying all this to me?" Grandalimus was shaking his head and squeezing the young elf's shoulders, trying to relax him. I have one more mission I have to set out for. I must go alone, and am not sure how long it will take before I return. The Elf King was now blunt with his words, his green eyes potent. You must stay here and watch what I cannot. You are a man now, my son. Do what is right. And with that, the King of Elves bolted so quickly from the balcony and out of the hall's entrance that none of the companions had time to react. Avador rose to his feet to give chase, but two sets of strong hands held him back firmly. Father! Avador screamed as the first fragments of light seeped through the apex of the Trude Mountains. The echo of the young elf's voice resonated across the valley below with such force that it might have shattered the mountain peaks. Chapter 4, Servant. The chamber was nothing as it used to be, nor was the courtyard for that matter. In fact, the entire castle's stronghold looked nothing as it once was. Yes, it is still up on a colossal mountain on an island across a vast body of water. But what it once was and what it is now are utterly two different things. While flourishing green and gold vegetation formerly gave the fortress splendor and existence, the setting altered to an unsightly view from afar. Those who approached regretted it the moment they drew close to the eeriness of what it had become. The once high-polished gray stone walls and pillars were now distorted to charred black, dripping with grime from years of neglect. The desolate stronghold, monstrous in size, used to flare with activity. Now only a small number lingered within, most of which wondered why they still remained. Brightly colored banners and flags once upon a time donned the vast castle walls. Now torn down or burnt years ago, the remnants flutter silently like spiderwebbing across dusty walls. The sun in the past used to shine high overhead above incredible towers that illuminated the whole countryside. Now even that is gone. All that is left is dull, misshapen moon that hangs gloomily somewhere to the east of the once vibrant stronghold. Skniba. The name hissed through the chamber for the third time. A man in dark robes was hobbling as fast as he could through corridors dimly lit by torches, some burning, some long burnt out in the brackets. A deformed man, tall, twisted, and gaunt, almost skeletal under his dark robes, ran with quick, jerky movements. He had the appearance of someone running with one leg a good deal shorter than the other. He ran to heed the beckoning of his master. If he were too slow, he would be disciplined once more. The dark-robed character reached the entrance of the chamber just as his name was called the fourth time. He clenched the hood of his robes with bony fingers, panting heavily and sweating profusely under the heavy clothing. You summoned, master? His voice was ragged and raspy, and he barely got the words out past the hood that concealed his face. He paused and tried again. You called for me, your highness? The chamber was vast, with marble floors and pillars. A once exquisite fountain, now emptied of its water and collecting dust, sat in the precise center of the chamber. Broad, spacious flights of steps occupied the left and right sides of the rectangular hall, giving the look of bleachers in the games arena. A giant crystal chandelier clung, if barely, to a tall ceiling exactly above the fountain. A higher, steeper flight of steps were set opposite the corridor entrance of which the man called Skniba now stood waiting to be commanded. Come closer. The voice came from a powerful-looking man sitting on a granite throne that rested on the pinnacle of the far steps. A thick mane of curly hair, gray with hints of rusty red, flowed from under the golden crown. He had a bushy, unruly beard that reached his bulky yet solid chest. Thick forearms protruded from the sleeves of a disheveled king's robe. One hand securely seized a slender scepter 3 meters in length. On the scepter's tip, copious green vapor emitted from a small black sphere, flanked by 2 crescents. Skniba took slow, uneasy steps forward like a child that knows he is to be punished. He stopped deliberately at the fountain, hoping this distance would suffice. Putting one gnarled hand on the cold stone of the fountain, He steadied himself as he watched and waited for what his master would ask of him. "Did you do the magic?" the master asked so abruptly that it made Skniba jump as the words echoed within the chamber. "I did," Skniba said after finding the ability to speak again. "Come closer," the man on the throne commanded once again. Skniba twitched uncomfortably but did as he was told. As he approached the base of the high steps to the throne, the big man deliberately raised the scepter a few inches higher above his head. Skniba cringed at the motion, with gritted teeth shrank back a few paces. "Is he out of my way?" he asked, his gaze never leaving the broken man below. "He is, King Aeonis," Skniba replied with a hint of remorse in his raspy voice. "The elf king has met a fate worse than death." There was a time-consuming silence. "Why haven't I heard from you today, Skniba?" The man stood now, menacing at his full height. The robed man at the bottom of the stairs lowered his head and wished he could disappear from existence. "I was resting," he lied. "Think before you act, Skniba," the burly man warned, glaring at the other who stood humble beneath him, and asked again, "Why have I not heard from you today?" Skniba knew there was nothing left for him to do but tell the truth. "I was mourning the death of King Jadonis." The words exited his mouth in an acidic sigh. Aeonis took one step down from his throne. The color drained entirely from his face. "I have warned you never again mention my brother's name." King Aeonis was suddenly overcome by fury, so severe that Skniba shrank away in terror. He began to run in the opposite direction, but was stopped shortly by Aeonis's commanding voice. "Stop!" Aeonis was shaking with rage, the scepter raised high above his head. "Master," Skniba was whimpering. "Master, please." "Come forth, I order you." The words oozed through clenched teeth. The tall, broken man twisted ever so slowly to face his master. He was compelled, without the ability to do otherwise, to obey his master, no matter what the command. Nothing good could become of what was to follow. Well, that concludes those two chapters. Thank you again for watching, and if you want to be updated when I release more stuff, please like and subscribe.